Welcome to today's episode, in which I'm looking at the Dogon people of Mali. Now, the question that you would wonder and probably ask is specifically why talk about these so-called the Dogon people of Mali. Well, they are a small population in Mali. They live in the western part of that country, and they hold some quite interesting stuff, and this is what I'm here to talk about. And when I say they are a small population, they are about 300,000 to 800,000 people. Yeah, it's a small population. So the Dogon people, why talk about them specifically is the information they hold. And this information, you find that it has to do with religion. Of course, every African country has got its own religion and the beliefs that they had. So they have their own religion, and that's what, not specifically something that I really want to dwell on, but they have a religion. And they also believe in some sort of creation, so the universe was created by a particular something, and that's what I also want to just highlight. But the most interesting stuff that really has brought me here is the information on cosmology. So they have information on cosmology, and cosmology is anything that has to do with the structure of the world, and the structure of the galaxy, the structure or why this is so in the galaxy, who created so and so, the history of the galaxy as well. That is what we are looking at when we say cosmology. So they hold some level of information on cosmology, and that's where the interesting part now comes in. So a study was conducted that was in 1831 to 1856 by two French anthropologists. So these two anthropologists went to in Mali, specifically among the Dogon people, and studied that particular religion or a group of people for a very long time. And as they studied, what they discovered is quite interesting of who the Dogon people are, and as well as the information that they hold. So the two French anthropologists is Diatelin, something like that, and Grael. They came from France, as I've already mentioned. So they discovered that the Dogon people had information about cosmology, and this is what they found. One is that the Dogon people actually believed that the world, or rather the universe, was created by their god, which they called Amma. And Amma, of course, when you look at the whole story that they hold, is that it's particularly similar to the story that we hear from the Bible, because we also believe that the universe was created by God. So their God that created this universe was called Amma. Another interesting fact that the two anthropologists discovered is that the Dogon people had information about the galaxy, specifically on the stars. Now, when we look at the stars, we are looking at one particular star, and this is the brightest star in the galaxy. So they had a name of that particular star, and they called it Sigtolo. And they also said that this particular star, which when we look at the scientific terminology is called the Sirius. So that bright star, in scientific terminologies, it's called the Sirius. Now, The Dogon people said this star, the brightest star, is not just an individual star. Next to it, there is another very less bright as compared to the Sigtolo or the Sirius A. So they said that there is another star that is close to Sirius A. Sirius A is the brightest one. I forgot to mention about the A part. So it's called, in scientific terminologies, it's called Sirius A. Now, next to Sirius A, there's another star that the Dogon people said is not really lying there, but it's orbiting Sirius A. And this particular star, they called it Potolo. Now, in the scientific terminologies, Potolo is called Sirius B. Now, when you look at Sirius B, the Dogon people said it's a very dense star, and of course it orbits around Sirius A, and it completes the orbit cycle in 6 years. That's what the Dogon people said. So Sirius B, which they called Potolo, orbits Sirius A, which they called Sigtolo, and it completes its cycle in 60 years. So you find that they even have a celebration which they celebrate every after 60 years, signifying that the Sirius B star has completed its cycle around Sirius A. This information, remember, is being obtained in 1831 to 1856 by the French anthropologists. Now, when you even look at when this information is being obtained, is that there was, of course, at that time there was the telescope, but the telescope at that time could not view the tiniest stars such as the Sirius B. And the Dogon people knew about this particular star. No one else, because everybody has come to know about Sirius B after the improvement of the current telescope, the telescope of 1862 thereabout. So that's when everybody came to know about this other particular star. But the Dogon people already knew, and they said it orbits around Sirius B, and they also said it's very, very dense and it's very small. You cannot see it with the naked eye. And of course, definitely, only after the improvement of the telescope were they able to see that indeed there is a star next, or rather orbiting Sirius B, and that was in 1862 thereabout, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, the other information that the Dogon people also had is that Jupiter has several moons. Okay, so they also knew that Jupiter had several moons. This information came before the scientists could actually view that indeed Jupiter has several moons. Then they also knew that Saturn, remember Saturn has rings, and we all know Saturn has a ring, not rings, has a ring around its feet, But the Dogon people already knew that Saturn had a ring around it. Jupiter had several moons in its planet. And you find that the scientists had to prove this information later on to try and ascertain what exactly the Dogon people are really saying. So in 1862, after the improvement of the telescope, they did prove that, the Dogon people of Mali indeed are saying the truth, especially when it came to the Sirius B star. And of course, the what we call it, the planet Saturn as well as that of Jupiter. But the only difference in what was discovered is that the Sirius B actually orbits around Sirius A. When the scientists viewed that particular movement of Sirius B around Sirius A, they discovered that it takes about 50.1 years to orbit. But the Dogon people say that it takes 60 years to orbit. Well, I would say the difference is not quite much, looking at the fact that the Dogon people were not even using any equipment to ascertain their information, but they were very close, which simply means it's only a less than 10 years difference from what the scientists actually discovered. So that is the information that the Dogon people of Mali had. Now, there's been a lot of speculation and, of course, thoughts by the Western scientists saying that these people cannot and must not, cannot hold such information. Where did they get such particular information about the galaxy? So, in view of what the two French anthropologists recorded about the Dogon people, so the Western scientists, their conclusion is that the Dogon people would have gotten that information. Probably they had some sort of interaction with a great ancient civilization. And a good example that they had is that they would have had some interaction with the Egyptian empire. Remember, Egypt was all into astronomy, and I think you find all types of pyramids that they have. So they are saying, which is all relating to astronomy and how those pyramids would have been built. Now, that is what the Western scientists are saying, that the Dogon would have had this information getting from, or the interaction they would have had with the great civilization. In this case, they are alluding to Egypt and probably any other ancient civilization, the great ancient civilization that we have not even discovered yet. So that is what the scientists are saying. But they are also saying that they would have obtained this particular information probably from interactions that they had from the early explorers and also the early missionaries. But I would argue with that particular statement. Why? Because when you look at when the Dogon people had an interaction with the explorers or the missionaries, that is in the 1800s, the beginning of 1800. And during that particular time, you'll find that the telescope that was there then was not advanced to be able to view the galaxy in its totality, to even be able to view the tiniest objects there is up there. So the only improvement that they did was in 1862, and they were able to even view that indeed what the Dogon people were saying is true. So when they say no, it's because they had interaction with the early missionaries or the explorers. Those people also didn't know anything. They also knew what we could all see. They just knew, oh, there's that bright star and things like that, but not to really go in detail and say, oh, close to it there's also another star smaller than that one and less bright and so on. So only that came to be discovered in 1862. So even if the Dogon people had interaction with the missionaries, they did not get that information from them, because even the missionaries then or the explorers then didn't have that particular information. The Western world is also saying the Dogon people would have gotten that information. What else did they say? Oh, they are also saying that probably it's just some myths that they believe in. So it's something that, it's just some stories that they've created. And then they've come to believe that this is what happened. But not necessarily to say they knew it. No. So they are saying these Dogon people would have just created such a story as, these myths, and then they came to believe them to say that this is what it was. So those are the three narratives of how the Western scientists are interpreting the information that is being held by the Dogon people of Mali. Now, the Dogon people themselves are saying, no. We got this information from a great extraterrestrial that visited them sometime in antiquity. So they are saying this particular being came and told them, and this being was called Nomo, N-O-M-M-O. So that is the being that came from the galaxy, from beyond, somewhere in the galaxy, visited them and told them this particular information. And of course, this creature, the extraterrestrial, was half human and half fish, because it had characteristics of a human being and that of a fish. It came from wherever place it came and visited the Dogon people and told them about the universe. This is not just a story. If you want, you can Google about the Dogon people of Mali and you find that indeed they have such particular information. Now, this information, of course, is argued mainly because it's not written record. It's not recorded anywhere. Therefore, people are disputing that no, there is no way record to show that this information indeed was gotten in this particular form. So the Dogon people have held on to this information through, of course, oral tradition, where they passed down. And the people that held on to this information among the Dogon people were the elders, or the people that they called the Hogon, are the people that had this information. So in some instances, you find that not all Dogon people have this information, but these elders of that particular region, or that particular religion, or that particular kind of people had, or the people that they called the Hogon had this particular information. So according to them, they got it from a very religious, or a creature which they called Nomo, which visited him sometime in antiquity and told them about that particular information. So this information is really there, that the Dogon people, and it's recorded because those two French anthropologists did record this particular information about the Dogon people of Mali. Now, the most also interesting thing, you'll find that it's not only the Dogon people of Mali that has some sort of information about the galaxy. We have the Igbo people of Nigeria also has, not specifically as that of the Dogon, but they also have some information about the galaxy. And the other people, the ancient Egyptians, also had similar information, because remember, for them, they were indeed into a lot of astronomy activities. So even that group, but of course everybody would say, yeah, Egypt, yeah, it's true, because those are not even blacks in it. But if you dig down a little, even the Egyptians, the real owners of Egypt are the black people. That's why I think if you look at some of the statues of the great pharaohs of Egypt, is that their noses are all knocked down, because people don't want to see that. That is not a nose of what? Of an Arab guy. It's a nose of a nigger or something like that. I'm allowed to say that word, you know? I'm allowed, okay? So yeah, so the Egyptians had information, the Igbo people of Nigeria had that information, not specifically exactly as the Dogon, but they held information. And you find that even the religious activities that they practiced, they followed a calendar specifically aligning themselves to the activities of the galaxy. Therefore, they had information pertaining to the galaxy. The other people that you find are the Aborigines of Australia, also had similar information. That's why they also held their festivals, their farming activities in relation to how the galaxy behaved. And of course, this is the information that you'll find it, but it's rare to even hear it so much being talked about, because this is the information that the Western world, of course, wouldn't want people to begin speculating of who exactly we were sometime back in antiquity. And that is why we ourselves need to begin digging this information and begin reading and learning of who we were in the past, unlike the history that we've been told we were. And remember, the history that is there is the history, the African history, when you look at it, is history that is just based on the Europeans. So it all begins from 14 or 1500 to today, to the colonial times. Anything else, there's nothing, anything that they'll tell you. Now is when you hear about the great empires that existed in Africa, the likes of Mansa Musa, the Queen of Sheba, and so on. So we really need to begin digging this information. And will you imagine that just next to here, that is Zimbabwe, there is a Great Wall of Zimbabwe, which was built. Up to now, nobody understands what sort of machinery would have been used or what sort of technology would have been used to build the Great Walls of Zimbabwe, because just the way the walls have been structured, it's a little bit difficult to even use the current technology to build. That also brings the story of the Great Walls of Benin as well, the same. And you'll find that these are the things that they'll never talk about. And even the Great Walls of Zimbabwe as well as of Benin, the Western world have really refused that there is no way that these so-called Africans could have built such a great walls, that even the current technology can't interpret how that particular the walls were built. So we really need to begin learning and relearning, and of course exploring of how things were in the past. I know other people would say, what would be the importance of actually learning about history? Well, that is why they are able to control the narrative, because they are feeding you the history that is false, and therefore you continue being a little tiny something controlled by the so-called whites. But meanwhile, you are something that is great in the past, as you are now, and you need to begin claiming that by learning and exploring what exactly you were. So that is the story of the Dogon people of Mali. I hope you had found this information quite interesting as I did. I have learned some new things about this particular religion. I just wonder what else could be there that we don't know.